Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our remote meeting of the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education. My name's Paul Welch and I'm the chair of SACRE. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live to the Council's website and will be available for viewing for a minimum of 6 months. I would like to give a warm welcome to members, officers, and any members of the public or media who are watching this live stream of the meeting. Before I commence the formal business on the agenda, I'd like to cover some housekeeping issues for us all to follow in order that the meeting will run as efficiently as possible. So please bear with us as this format is quite new to us all. For those of you who are participating in the meeting, I would ask you to only speak, please, if invited by myself as chair. I would like you to keep your microphone on mute at all times unless you're invited to speak. And obviously for committee members, if you wish to speak, you will find a chat function in Teams. This is a small bubble usually on the top of your screen, which will open a chat function. And if you type into the chat RTS, that stands for request to speak, then I will make a note of that and we'll bring you into the discussion as soon as possible. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and your position. So what I would like to do is do a short round of introductions. I will go through the list and invite you to speak. Just if you'd like to say your name and who you're representing, that would be really appreciated. So it is bringing me in alphabetical order, Alison Hartley.
Alison Hartley, representing the teaching union NASUWT.
Thank you, Alison. Lovely to have you with us. Barry Dunn.
Hi, my name is Barry Dunn and I am from Seaham High School. I was involved in the development of some of the materials for the new agreed syllabus, hence my participation.
Thank you, Barry. I think you're in the RE curriculum group, so that's appreciated. Carol Spencer.
Hello, I'm Carol Spencer. I'm a SACRE member representing the Baha'i Faith.
Thank you, Carol, and great to see you. We also have Caroline Weir.
Hi, I'm Caroline Weir, representing the Church of England.
Thank you, Caroline. We also have with us today in attendance Catherine Robson.
Hi, it's Catherine Robson, representing Education Durham.
Thank you, Catherine. We have Councillor Eunice Huntington.
Sorry.
Are you there, Councillor?
Yes, I'm there now. I had difficulty getting the sound back on. Yes, my name is Eunice Huntington. I'm a county councillor and I'm covering Shotton, Hasswell and South Hetton. I'm also a member of the Salvation Army.
Thank you, Eunice. It's lovely to have you. We have Councillor Fraser Tinsley. Are we there, Councillor Tinsley?
Yeah. No, if you press that now, the mute,
Okay.
You don't mute.
We could all make sure that we are muted until I call your name. Councillor Fraser Tinsley.
Yeah, Fraser Tinsley, County Councillor for Wellington and Hunwick Division.
Thank you. We have Councillor John Shuttleworth.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor John Shuttleworth, County Councillor for Weardale, And I just need to advise you, I've got to go to a pension training meeting at 2:30, but we'll take it from there. Thanks.
That's noted. Thank you. And thank you for your attendance. And Councillor Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Brown, Councillor for Neville's Cross. Today I'm substituting for Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm very happy about that substitution and happy that you are joining us. We have Deanna van der Velde.
Hello, Deanna van der Velde here, representing the Jewish faith.
Okay. Thank you, Deanna. We have, is it Helen Tate?
Hello, sorry, yes, I'm Helen Tate, the head at St Margaret's Church of England Primary School.
Thank you. I have Joanna, is that Joanna Pallister, presumably? We'll come back to that. Julie Rimmer.
Hi, I'm Julie Rimmer. I'm the lead for support and provision in education, Durham and Children and Young People Services at the County Council.
Thank you, Julie. We also have with us Carenza Passmore.
Oops. Sorry, Paul, my camera won't go. Hello, everybody, it's Carenza Passmore here. I'm representing the Church of England, and it's nice to see you all after a really long time.
A familiar voice is perfectly acceptable, Carenza, don't worry. We have Canon Linda Burton.
Hello, I am Linda Burton and I'm also representing the Church of England.
Thank you. We have with us Mike Dixon. Who I know is having some troubles. Are you there, Mike? We may have to come back to Mike. We also have our Vice Chair, Judith Bainbridge.
Yes, hello everybody. Yes, I'm Judith Bainbridge. I used to represent curriculum support, but I'm out to represent the Methodist Church.
Thank you, Judith. We have Sharon Lupton.
Hi everybody, I'm Sharon Lupton. I'm subject leader for RE at Sedgefield Community College and I'm part of the curriculum group on Sacre.
Thank you, Sharon. We have Susan Walker. Are you there, Susan? No. Okay, we have Wendy Gray.
Hello everyone, I'm Wendy Gray and I represent Buddhism.
Thank you, Wendy. And we also have our clerk, Paula Nicholson. Okay, Mike's just messaged in the chat to say that he can hear, but his microphone isn't working. Okay, so welcome everyone. I know this is a very unusual way to meet, and I do hope the meeting will be constructive and we will get through our agenda to be finished within the 2-hour allocated time slot. I'd like to start with some apologies. I've had a couple forwarded to me, and they are obviously Councillor Martin, who's asked Councillor Brown to substitute. We have an apology from Vicky Bain, representing the National Education Union. Francis Johnson, who I believe represents the Methodist Church, and Melanie Loudon, who I believe who represents the National Education Union, together with myself. Is anybody aware of any other apologies? Oh, I've also noticed in the chat, and I'll come back to that, that Joanna Pallister now has sound and she represents the Roman Catholic Church. Thank you, Joanna. I thought it was you, and I hope you feel very welcome, and I'm glad that's working. Okay. Oh, Bhakti Rasa, thank you. Would you like to unmute and just introduce yourself? Is that apologies, or is that you're here in the meeting?
Hi, Paul. Hi, Chair, and hi, members representing Hinduism here. Nice to be.
Great that you could join us, Bhakti Rasa. It's lovely to hear from you again. So that's perfect. Okay, so we'll make a start with the meeting unless we're aware of any further apologies. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of March, our last meeting around about 1 year ago. If anybody would like to, well, actually, I actually have received a couple of representations around these minutes. And actually, I do have a proposal rather than take each page of the minutes page by page, because I believe that there are a couple of issues and inaccuracies in the minutes that need to be worked on. My proposal is to withdraw those minutes for now, and that I would work on those minutes and consult the people who've made representations around that and put those minutes on the next agenda. So I'm presuming if anybody has anything that they would like to speak against with regards to that proposal, now would be a good time to type RTS in the chat, if that's something you would like to speak against. Okay, if not, then, like I said, I propose to withdraw the minutes and to bring a different version of the minutes. I have Carol Spencer wishing to speak against. So if you'd like to unmute, Carol.
Sorry, Paul, I'm not wishing to speak against. I'm just wishing to raise the issue. The minutes mention about, I can't remember the word, endorsing the humanist information. Whereas as far as I know, there isn't really a role for Sacre to endorse it. I thought there was going to be a link because it's there, because we have no control over it. So we're not really in a position to endorse it. And there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about it, that it shouldn't have agreed syllabus as part, as the main part of its title, because it isn't part of the agreed syllabus. It's merely supplementary information in the same way that other stuff is supplementary information.
Thank
you. So if you're happy to include that in your redoing of the minutes, then that's fine with me.
Thank you, Carol. I have received one item of any other business, and that is to do with the endorsement of the humanist support material today. So I would say that item will likely be dealt with under that item of any other business. But I'm quite happy, like I said, to make changes as necessary to put another version of the minutes in front of colleagues, so we can be certain about the accuracy. Linda, you'd like to speak? Linda, you must be on mute.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. I completely agree with your idea of withdrawing these minutes. I'm just a little concerned that it seems very important to me that the point that's on page 6, the final page of the minutes, might it be useful to consider whether members asked if C. Robson would be in attendance at future Sacre meetings to feed back? might that be worth considering today, given that I think she's here?
I think that could be something brought up under matters arising.
Okay.
But I would say, in terms of the minutes, do you have anything against us removing and working further on the minutes and sending another version out? Is that something?
No, I have nothing against that at all.
Okay, thank you. Then, unless anybody else would wish to speak, I am proposing that we do not take the minutes of the previous meeting, that they are worked on a little bit further, and that a version of those will be presented at the next meeting. And I hope that resolves anybody's concerns. Okay. Then also, we've got, sorry, I've just come out of that. Sorry. We have also got, have we also got any declarations of interest, item 3 on your agenda? No declarations of interest, thank you. Matters arising. Carol, would you like to open that one up, because it's something that I wanted to speak about too? Would you like to open that up under matters arising? You mentioned in the chat.
Sorry, Paul, do you mean the bit that I've just put in about the planning meetings?
Yes.
Yeah. Just that I wasn't on the list of the names, and I thought I had put my name forward to be involved in that. I don't know what's happened about it. I know that I can't always be available when other people are, but I'm happy to be involved if, you know, if those planning meetings are happening.
Okay. No, that's fine. As you'll recall from the last meeting and the minutes of the last meeting, we did make a decision to try to have a kind of SACRE planning committee to help drive the SACRE agenda, so that it's not just the chair alone placing items on the agenda. Unfortunately, due to the global pandemic and the way that we've been working, we haven't been able to have that meeting, but I am keen to diary a date for that meeting that we might need to come to before the next meeting. So I definitely note that Carol wished to be involved in that. And that will be noted, and I can only apologise that we haven't had the opportunity, in a sense, to hold one of those meetings. Linda, did you want to come back to your other matter arising? Are you there, Linda?
Yes, yes. Well, if I since Catherine is present at this meeting, I was just wondering whether she's going to report to SACRE about more than the agreed syllabus launch. Whether she's going to report on her work that she's been doing as a result of the agreed following the agreed syllabus launch.
Okay, so as far as the agenda is concerned, we have the virtual launch on the agenda is item 6, and an Education Durham report for item 7. Julie has asked to speak. Julie, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I'm more than happy if Catherine's willing to do that jointly, because obviously Catherine was the person that did most of the work, but she is here in order to respond to those things. So that's not a problem at all as far as we're concerned. But I think it's important to remember that that Catherine is employed by Education Durham to do contract work for us, and it is not somebody that necessarily SACRE can direct to do work on their behalf.
Thank you, Julie. Is there any further comments or questions from anyone on matters arising? Okay, Wendy did want, but then has decided not to. Anybody else? I'll just give you a moment because I know it takes a little bit of time. It's not as easy in a committee room to get my attention. Okay, so we'll close agenda item 4, matters arising, and go to agenda item 5, chair's comments. Can I just remind everyone to keep their teams on mute, please, during the session? In terms of chair's comments, I had a couple of things that I would like to obviously raise. First of all, we have been in a very, very difficult situation as a result of the global pandemic. That has resulted, as you're aware, in us postponing the summer SACRE meeting. I felt very much that this was the right decision and the right thing to do at the time, and that was because obviously I am aware that there are some SACRE members who do not have access to technology, and I realise very much that this is a very different sort of meeting. And I think in terms of the experience that people had at that particular point, using this type of technology to conduct a meeting of this kind was perhaps quite limited. So I do still stand by that and believe that quite firmly that was the best decision at the time. I also noted that nobody had contacted me to ask for any agenda items. And I didn't feel there were any pertinent agenda items at this particular time. So for that reason, we postponed that meeting. In a sense, regrettably, we also postponed the November or the autumn term meeting of 2020. For similar reasons, I've got to say, although I've got to point out that at least by this time, I'm certainly much more familiar with Teams, and I believe some of you will be much more familiar using this kind of setup to hold these meetings. So I think it was a case of, again, trying to explore what's possible. So I am very glad that we're here today, because I certainly didn't want to disrupt any momentum that we've built in SACRE. I think it's important to point out, and this is also for members of the general public who might be watching, that most SACRE volunteers, people are here in a voluntary capacity. Members are here representing their organisations or faiths in a voluntary capacity. And I think that, and whilst this is extremely appreciated, you can imagine the situation obviously we face trying to have a meeting like this, as opposed to a meeting where we would be in a committee room in County Hall. I am very glad we could meet today. I do think it's extremely important to have regular SACRE meetings. I think it's important because it keeps the momentum of this, but I would ask for your understanding as to why I took those very difficult decisions at the time, and I did so as chair, and I'm fully culpable and accountable for those decisions. So I'd just like to raise that. I also must say, and I think this is perhaps more for agenda item 8, where I hope to bring in a few more colleagues. Agenda item which looks at RE in a virtual world. We have gone through in education a total transformation of how we educate in a kind of virtual learning environment, and this is in many respects absolutely amazing. And we have achieved so much in a very short space of time. And I'm sure I speak for my colleagues who work in schools, as in myself, who can verify for the real high quality learning experiences that are going on at home, even this very week. And of course, this week is potentially more difficult than most as colleagues prepare to go back into school for where there may be timetable changes. Myself going from a 1 week, 1 hour lesson timetable to a 2 week timetable with 2 hour lessons. So you can start to appreciate very much the impact, on colleagues at this particular time. So it has been a very steep learning curve, I think, for all of us, and I would really, I'm welcoming some discussion actually in item 8. That's just to pre-warn, especially teaching colleagues in the room, that you know, we are living in a very different environment now and working in a very different environment. There are some positives, there are some negatives. Okay, as you can appreciate, it is very difficult in some cases to interact with students and with our learners in the same way. So I think this is, you know, all I wanted to say really about the pandemic. It is, as I'll use that word, which was used quite a few times, unprecedented. We live in very different times as a result, but there is so much positivity and positive work going on, and I think we have to, as SACRE, recognise that and try to understand that, because I think that's quite important. You know, that we do that. So I have no further chair's comments today. I don't know if anybody has any. If anyone would like to take the floor or have anything that they would like to raise under chair's comments, I'm always quite happy if anyone wishes to question or challenge or ask any details of anything. You just need to let me know in the chat by typing RTS. Okay, well, thank you for your continued trust and confidence, and I do hope that everyone is safe and well and looking after themselves. That is extremely important in these very difficult times. And I would ask you to, and like I said, for the foreseeable future, at least for our next meeting, this will be very much the format of SACRE for now, moving forward, and until, of course, we see hopefully the positive impact of the vaccine, and we see the positive impact on our communities and on the drop in the number of infections that take place. So I'd like to move on then to item 6, getting through this very quickly today, to the agreed syllabus virtual launch. Before I open this item, I would just like to say a couple of things. First of all, this, as you will appreciate, was never the intended way of launching the new Durham Agreed Syllabus that you have all contributed to and voted upon. This was not my ideal vision of what we should do, in the sense that the global pandemic absolutely changed the dynamic. As you're aware, we were also quite delayed due to various reasons with the agreed syllabus. And as you will appreciate, as chair, I wish to not delay the launch of that any further. So we have a report. I believe that Catherine or Julie will be speaking on this report. It's a very comprehensive report, including everything that was planned. If we have any further questions, I'm sure colleagues will be happy to take them. So could I pass over to Catherine or Julie, please? Julie, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I hope that obviously everybody's had time to read the report that was tabled, and I thank Catherine for kind of her contributions to that report. Well, as you can imagine, it was quite a challenge to move from the physical launch event that we had planned for last May and June. It's a year ago, but it seems such a long time ago now. A huge challenge to move from that to a virtual event. But in fact, we managed to launch it roughly at the same time as we would have launched it had we had the actual physical event, because it was about trying to prepare schools to be able to implement the agreed syllabus from September 2020. In hindsight, it was actually a very prudent decision that was made, because we wouldn't have been in a position to hold any face-to-face events, or at least until, well, I'll say autumn this year, if indeed autumn this year, because we don't know that at the moment. So it would have pushed any implementation back yet again to, I would have thought, the earliest September 2022, because even if we'd launched it in the autumn term, it would have meant that schools would have needed the rest of that year to prepare, because they wouldn't change their curriculum halfway through a year because of the way that they would plan. So, you know, in a way, as I say, looking back in hindsight, it was, you know, a decision that, you know, was very prudent. The model that was used actually is something that has subsequently been used in 2 other local authorities that we work with as well. So, you know, we're pleased that, if you like, Durham was the prototype for that, and it meant that we knew we could convince other people that it would work, and indeed it did work. So you'll have had, as I say, the report itself. The final feedback, as you'll have seen in the report, has been extremely positive. Though, you know, we do acknowledge there were some challenges to overcome initially, as many of our teachers in the county were really unfamiliar with how to use Teams. In fact, we were teaching them as we went. So some of the problems that they encountered in logging on were problems that all of our teachers were encountering, regardless of which subject area they were in. And actually, it was generally because the school systems were not set up with the right permissions. So it wasn't that they didn't have Teams because the local authority had provided Teams, or schools were using, in some cases, kind of other systems. It was actually that the classroom teachers themselves, or the subject coordinators, particularly in primary, hadn't really, it wasn't until they tried to get on that they realised they couldn't get on, and it generally meant that in the school, it meant that the network managers actually had to do some work behind the scenes to allow them access to something that that was already there. So that was a challenge, but actually it was overcome quite quickly when we realised what was actually happening, and it happened in a few cases. But this is, as Paul has said, this is now the norm, and just to give some context to that, the way in which the syllabus was launched is the way that we've been delivering training in schools since last April. So we in the education department have a training offer that delivers 150 to 200 courses per term to staff in our schools, and we didn't deliver anything in the last week before the Easter holidays last year because, you know, we were obviously schools, you know, children were being sent home and so forth, and so we had a 2-week gap. But from actually Easter itself onwards, we've maintained exactly the presence that we had before. So we switched everything to online. So this, in a way, was linked to all of the rest of the work that we were doing. And it's now a kind of tried and tested model, as you know, obviously we're experienced in today. So that, you know, this is now the norm in the way that teachers for the last year have received their training and their support. It was really pivotal, interestingly, in the development of more interest, if you like, in the RE curriculum. As you'd imagine, it happens when the syllabus is relaunched each time. And as a result of that, We've had more requests for support. We've put on more training courses than we would have put on previously for RE in a normal year. And that has been at the, as I say, the request of the schools, and I think really down to the quality of what they were getting. They wanted more of the same, or well, more that would enhance what they were doing, and getting really into the detail of how to actually educate children in a really effective way. So as a result of the syllabus, you know, there has been an uptake in interest and an uptake in schools requesting, you know, ways in which they can really enhance their curriculum and develop the pedagogy within school. So, you know, I'd like to really pay tribute to the knowledge and skills of Catherine in actually making that such a successful launch in the end, even though it wasn't what any of us had actually anticipated would be the launch. You know, we were all used to having attended launches in a building before and having, I would call it, you know, lots of activity going on at the same time. And it's not the same when you're on a screen, and it's not the same when you are accessing material either at, you know, synchronously or asynchronously when you can access it afterwards. But what they did have, which they wouldn't have had they attended a launch actual event, was a platform that is still running, that people can still communicate with each other and can still access materials that they had at the launch event. So so in some respects, it, you know, it's always about looking at the opportunities that these things present rather than the you know, the negativities that sometimes actually accrue from these events that happen. So I don't intend to go through the report because you've had the report for that time, but I'm quite happy if anybody has any questions or any observations.
Wendy.
Hi, thanks, Julie. That's great. And the report's great. It's lovely to see all the comments there as well from people who took part. I just have one question for you, which is on page 3 of the report and page 11 of our papers. And it refers to an ebook of resources that was produced to include support materials for 17 of the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 units. Could you tell us a bit more about that? And what it is.
Wendy, that's where I'm going to hand over to Catherine because she obviously produced the ebook. I mean, what I will tell you is it's an electronic book that actually teachers can download from our eShop that we have, which is where we put some of the materials that we do actually make available through Education Durham. But Catherine can give you more details on what's in it. So Catherine, it's over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Wendy, for your kind comments. In terms of the ebook, as Isabel and the agreed conference for the agreed syllabus had been reviewing and writing the new syllabus, some support materials had been put together for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And so within the agreed syllabus, there are exemplar long-term plans. And in light of the Key Stage 1 and 2 exemplar plans, there were support materials for each of these units, well, 17 of them. Now, some of the support materials were just overviews of how to take the programmes of study and the benchmark expectations and what should be included within that unit. And some of the resources actually had lesson by lesson plans developed. So what we did, again, at the request of colleagues within Durham, Isabel had shared with them some of that planning in its early stages before her retirement. So they were aware they were in kind of circulation. All we did is put them together and launch them on an ebook so that colleagues could access them and download them. And what we made sure is that they were editable so that they could have them in a format that they could edit. And then this again was extended beyond the authority to the other local authorities that bought the syllabus.
Wendy, did you want to come back in directly about that?
Yes, thank you. It's lovely to hear your voice, Catherine. It's so nice that you're around again. My question is, can we get access to it as members of SACRE?
So hi Wendy, I'm just waving at you. Don't know, Paul, if that's allowed on professional nature on a broadcast. You're more than welcome to access them by downloading them and buying them. But what I can do is I could talk to, well, Julie, you're on the line. We could share one example so colleagues get a sense of that. Would that be okay with you?
That would be really nice. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Julie, are you in agreement with that?
I think we can. I think, Catherine, we could take some selected resources from there and share those with SACRE so that they can get a sight of a range of them. As you'll appreciate, folks, that the materials that were produced took quite a lot of producing, and actually, there is a monetary cost to producing that. I have to pay Catherine every time she works for me, and so that's one of the reasons why we produce these resources that can be downloaded actually by anybody around the country, to be fair. But they might not think it necessarily matches with their particular syllabus. So but there will be some things in there that can be used generically. But I think, Catherine, if you're able to just pull together just a selection of a few of those pages so that people can see the kind of thing that's there, then I think that would be helpful.
More than happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Wendy, anything further? Okay, thank you. I have Carol Spencer wishing to speak.
Thank you, Paul. It's just a question about the numbers attending. Because it mentions that 150 colleagues accessed the digital launch, and I just wondered how that compared with the normal in-person, because the last time I was able to be there, there were quite a lot of people there, and I was obviously only there for one of the 2 sessions that time. So it was just to know overall how that compared, please.
Thank you, Carol. I would say, without going back and checking, I would say it was probably on a par, if not slightly more, than would have attended previously, because I know that the room capacity in Neville Hall is 80 for a conference, and I know that obviously there would have been members like yourself there. So if you take into account that I think the last one were 3 launch events, 2 for primary, 1 for secondary, then you're probably looking at round about the same numbers, bearing in mind that obviously the vast majority of our secondary schools now are academies and don't necessarily take on board the agreed syllabus. So I don't think it was certainly no less. It probably was slightly more.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Any further questions for Julie or Catherine, or points of clarification regarding the report for the agreed syllabus launch? Caroline, would you like to ask that as a question?
Sure, happy to say it. Thank you, Julie and Catherine, for all the work that you put into getting it online so quickly, having to be so agile in that. So thank you for all your work on that. I was just wondering, because I know a number of us had hoped to attend in person, but were unable to, but whether we as SACRE members will be able to access the actual recordings or whatever it was that was put out to teachers, so that we could see what was presented on the day, to sort of relive the experience that we missed.
Julie,
it might be possible to do some selection of that as well, because I think that when you say on the day, it wasn't actually delivered over just one day. It was delivered over a period of time. And I think some of those things were also where it was interactive, and so therefore again it's that copyright issue, but also the issue of those were not recorded to be published to somebody to then necessarily be used again, if that makes sense. So I'd have to check around the copyright, and I'd have to check around GDPR, because of it would be people who were perhaps talking to Catherine at the same time as well. So I'd need to check that first, but certainly again we can give you a flavour of some of that, I'm sure.
Just to confirm to SACRE, I have had some involvement in this, and I think it will be only fair for me to say so and come in with that. I had originally sat down with Catherine many weeks before the actual to plan our physical launch, and I've got to say we had a I would say, a fantastic plan on paper, with very clear opportunities for SACRE members to be involved at a certain point in that launch physically, and of course that was trumped by the situation at the time. I'm also very pleased to say that Catherine, continued to work with me, and I provided some voiceovers. So some colleagues do receive, when they click on, for example, some of the agreed syllabus materials, a voiceover with my voice welcoming them to the agreed syllabus, explaining a little bit about the role of SACRE and how the syllabus came about. So I just wanted to reassure colleagues that there was that involvement from the chair. I think it was extremely difficult at this point to have involved colleagues more widely in the launch. I was able to attend the launch on the day that it was launched, and also I think it's also worth pointing out that, it also happens that some schools might have missed that launch because the material's all there and the whole, in a sense, series of training is all together on one kind of Teams channel or site. This means that schools have been able to buy into it later. So I've had colleagues that I know who've contacted me and said, is it still possible to access the material? And obviously the answer is yes. And obviously through Education Durham, they're able to get access and buy into that material if necessary. And from that point on, they're able to get that training because as Julie said, and I think it's quite right to say so, if we hadn't taken a decision to move towards a virtual launch, I think we would not, we still wouldn't have launched it today. I honestly think, because there is not the capacity to get rooms in people in rooms and socially distance, and certainly absolutely not during a lockdown, of which we've now had 3. So I do really commend Catherine and Julie for their work alongside that launch. I think it was a learning curve. It was a difficult experience. I can only reiterate what Julie said about getting to grips with teams and helping teaching staff and RE coordinators access that material through Teams, because it was very new back then. I think if we had the knowledge that we have now about how things could work with hindsight, which we know is a great thing, we could potentially change the dynamic of the launch. But I don't think that's a fair comment to make, really, because at the time everything was done, to get the syllabus launched. And I think Barry has made a key point. And if anyone wishes to speak, do please put RTS in the chat. A lot of from a school's perspective and a calendar perspective, the time in which this was launched was the time where teaching staff would have availability to start to work on long-term and medium-term plans to implement the agreed syllabus, and this time frame of when it was launched was really crucial in order to ensure that it would be in Durham schools for September. And I think that was absolutely the right decision, because I know that the syllabus has had a real impact. So it was necessary to work quickly and to work fast, and sadly and regrettably that didn't involve a wider network of SACRE members, which definitely for future launches would always be given and always be the case. So thank you. I notice Alison's also made a comment that she attended as a teacher and she found it extremely useful and helpful, and thanking colleagues for the work that went into that launch. And Helen has also mentioned that her RE coordinator attended and offered her thanks. So unless there's any further questions, I'm happy to close that agenda item. I think it might be worth drawing SACRA's attention to the costs of the production of the agreed syllabus, which is at the which is before the appendices, because this stems from a freedom of information request that I'm aware came in, and I believe Julie and her team did some calculations around the cost, including this support, the writing, including of course the launch, the training, the consultation, development, and everything that comes together with that. And obviously, as you can see, it's quite a substantial sum of money. It's quite a substantial investment in RE for schools in Durham, and I'm very grateful that we have, and I'm very proud that we have such an amazing agreed syllabus. Wendy.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I just want to comment really on the costs, that those costs don't include all the hours and hours and hours that were spent by members of the committee of SACRA in meeting to support and review and edit over a period of 2 years. So it is a substantial investment, but it's a really, really important thing. So well done everybody who's got it out there and launched it, and thank you for all that hard work.
Thank you, Wendy, and you're absolutely right to point that out, because the level of scrutiny and support that colleagues in SACRA have given around the agreed syllabus is really vital to its success. So I do want to reiterate how important that is, and in a sense what a shame it is that we weren't able to have a more interactive launch, but nevertheless, as you can see from the report, it seems to have been well received. Okay, if there's no further comments on the agreed syllabus launch, then I'll go on to item 7, which is the education. Linda, is that agreed syllabus?
May I just ask either Julie or Catherine, in previous times, the launch of a new Durham agreed syllabus has been quite a trailblazing thing for all manner of authorities round about, and it's become something that I know that Isabel had all kinds of contracts with different local authorities in times past to do work with them, and on producing a version suitable for them or whatever. Is that kind of thing happening this time with this latest agreed syllabus?
Linda, the work that Isabel was doing before she retired, she was actually working on 4 different syllabi. She was working on North Tyneside, South Tyneside, Hartlepool and Durham. And actually, when you said trailblazing, in a way it was, because what we did as a result of obviously having done what we did for Durham to launch it, we actually did the same in Hartlepool and South Tyneside, and Catherine led those as well. But obviously, those syllabus weren't exactly the same. They were slightly different.
Yeah.
Some of the materials, obviously, we mentioned there the ebook, could be used for some of them, because actually it does fit with some of that. But yes, you're right. Trailblazing, yes, because in a way that launch was, and it was launched in the same way. There was one other authority that we were working with that we've tried very hard to get them to launch theirs, but they're not doing that at the moment, which means it's just really sitting there not having been launched when we've offered them the support to be able to do what we did in Durham and Hartlepool and South Tyneside. So yes, in answer to that, yes, it has been trailblazing in the northeast, shall we say?
That's Julie, that is absolutely excellent to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now close that agenda item and open item 7, which is the Education Durham report to Sacre. I'm presuming Julie is again leading on this.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, so really, I just wanted to kind of summarise what had happened in the last year or so, because I know normally you would have had a report each year on the outcomes, which this would have been from the autumn term normally. I have to confess, I did try to do this, but in fact, the national data around the examinations is such that, you know, that data hasn't been collected in the same way as it would normally be collected because of the way in which grades were awarded to pupils in terms of their GCSEs and their A-levels. And so there is no national data set that allows us to look at the outcomes in County Durham across all of the schools and draw the same comparisons. Even if we had all of the data, the comparison would be difficult because you're not measuring the same thing, but we don't have all the data because the data hasn't been shared from the DFE with the data provider that provides all of the data for local authorities on the basis of which we would do this piece of work. So we're exactly the same at early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and so forth. We do have some data from some schools and that's because they buy into a different system called Fisher Family Trust, and they've actually uploaded their data, but the data sitting in there is only for 17 secondary schools, and so it's not fair to draw comparisons in terms of the overall statistics. But the trend within there for most of the schools is that the outcomes had increased, and I'm just going to leave that there. Because, you know, on the basis of that, you know, schools had, you know, they did produce their own data, but there were algorithms that were used to generate those final grades. So that's the reason there is no data for GCSE and there's no data for A-level. So I can't make anything of it in terms of any conclusions around that. So I also, this is really the work that's gone on over the year, which I've alluded to some of it as well. Obviously, Catherine has carried out the work in terms of the launch for the agreed syllabus. But I wanted really is also to draw your attention to what's happened as a result of that. And I did mention it around, you know, the request for more support. And actually that fell into 2 or 3 different categories. One was around actually coordinators asking for a course to be designed and delivered that was for primary RE coordinators, because they, you know, they're not specialists, most of them in school. They have to be the people who support the others in their school, usually in terms of implementing the agreed syllabus. And so they wanted some development for themselves around leading that within school. Not necessarily to kind of understand it, because obviously they've done that through the launch, but actually in terms of, and how do I take it forward from here, and the implementation. So that was done as a request. There were 37 primary coordinators that accessed that, and we actually delivered it twice, once in the summer holidays. And the reason for that it was because that's when teachers asked for it to happen. As you'll remember, in the summer term, they weren't actually teaching online in the way that many of them have taught online, you know, since then. They had were obviously preparing work to go home to children, but actually, as we all know, most teachers work through their holidays anyway, and so they felt that it was better to be ready for September, to have that course designed and delivered in the summer holidays. So Catherine duly agreed to do that in her holidays as well, shall we say, and so we delivered one cohort in the summer and one cohort in the autumn term as well. So that was very successful, and that came out of purely from, you know, if we hadn't done the launch, that wouldn't have been requested, and I don't think that would have happened at all. And the other thing that happened was that we then had some schools that requested some individual support through their service level agreements for an advisor to go in and work with them in school, albeit virtually at the moment, to help them as individuals, rather than access a course, to actually implement this in the way that, you know, was going to be effective within their schools. And also out of that came the request for more resources, which is why things like the ebook were developed, and also has just gone live today. Catherine will know this because we just got an email just before this meeting to say that the Easter resources that she's developed as well have gone live today on the eShop as well. The Christmas resources we just gave to the schools because we felt it was a gesture of goodwill. So so there's lots of work going on in RE, as well as the networks that happen each term. Catherine oversees that and makes sure that all of those things kind of link together, and that we get feedback from the schools to inform what the agenda is for the next meeting. Paul mentioned that there is a team site, and that is a site where all of these meetings happen through that site, but on that site are also things like resources that teachers can access as well. And that obviously isn't something that we had 12 months ago. So it's a very healthy picture in terms of the work, I think, that's been happening around RE in the last 12 months or so. So I'm quite happy to take, or Catherine, to take any questions around that as well, if colleagues would wish to do that.
Any further questions? I'll just give a moment to see if anybody wants to speak. Carenza, would you like to come in to speak?
It's not really a question, it's just a comment on teachers' time, and I understand that we are doing these things in the weekends and in the evenings, but actually teachers need a break, and until things settle down, I think we've got to be really wary. I'm not saying that the local authority shouldn't do that. I'm doing an awful lot of work in our own time as well with schools and networks, but you could effectively, as a secondary teacher, spend every night online doing something at the moment as an RE specialist, and that's a real concern about people keeping up and keeping sane.
Thank you, Carenza, absolutely. I think that's a very valid point, and I was going to come to that point actually as well under the next agenda item. So I think that's really important to point that out. Any further questions for colleagues from Education Durham around the report? Okay, then it's also just really to continue to thank colleagues from Education Durham for the hard work and for the commitment to RE. It's extremely important and valuable to us as SACRE, and I, as chair of SACRE, have made myself available to continue that support and to feed into network meetings and so on, and I do very much value and appreciate that. Okay, then if there's no further questions, we can move on to agenda item 8. There is no paper for agenda item 8 because it's a sort of an extension of Chair's comments, and I just wanted to really kind of give colleagues in the meeting an impression about kind of where we are at the moment with kind of teaching in a virtual world. I think it's really important that SACRE have that awareness, and I think Carenza's opened the door very well there to actually the massive increase potentially in workload that comes with that, and obviously I wouldn't be here representing a trade union as well if I wasn't pointing out the workload and the massive sacrifice that members of the teaching profession and support staff have actually made and contributed, especially more so at the moment. So I think it's fair to say historically that upon the initial lockdown, and other colleagues might want to come in here and add to this discussion, we did find ourselves we did just find ourselves having to set work for students to do at home. Now, obviously, this in some cases was the curriculum as it stood. In some cases, there had to be adaptations and changes to the curriculum, and obviously, this this obviously does have an impact in terms of pupils being then able to catch up with their curriculum. I've also got to say that schools quite luckily had virtual learning platforms, or at least most of them, in place. We used a different platform initially, and I'm sure there's a wide range of different platforms that have been used across Durham. And this platform allowed us to upload learning resource material and allowed students to access this at home. That was very initially the first phase of during the initial lockdown, what was very much happening at that particular point in time. And obviously, as you'll appreciate, there wasn't any necessarily direct contact with students other than perhaps staff that were making welfare calls to check to make sure that students were able to access this material, that they had devices, internet access, of course, because if that's not available, and we do have to bear in mind the issue of child poverty, I find it quite abhorrent that we have to reflect on the issue of child poverty in the 21st century in Durham, but I think we can all in this sacre say how deplorable it is that children are not living with access to these kind of materials that would help them learn. Obviously, a lot of work has gone in from schools, particularly with regards to supporting learners who are vulnerable, supporting especially those with devices, and trying to make sure that they had access to this material. Obviously, as you can appreciate, going back to school in September was a very interesting experience. It was interesting because on one hand we were teaching lessons in front of students, but within a week a whole group or bubble of students could be self-isolating at home. So you could be teaching their next lesson online and their following lesson online, and then revert back to a face-to-face lesson. So I think it's really important that as Sacre you're aware of the impact of coronavirus in the classroom, because obviously that generally does disrupt education. When I say teaching a lesson online, I'm really referring now to live teaching, which is taking place online, and I'm referring to using platforms such as the one we're using for this meeting, where, for example, students are online at a specified time for their lesson, cameras are switched off, their microphones are switched off, and obviously we are delivering a very bespoke online lesson. And I think this is where the issue about quality comes in, and it's very important to say that those in education have taken very seriously the need to provide quality education during this point, and this is absolutely certain in RE departments, at least that I know of, that they have gone above and beyond to adapt and change resources. As you'll appreciate, there are various resources in the classroom. Take a very simple strategy like think, pair, share, where you ask students to think about an issue or a question. You then ask them to share that, what they think, with their partner, with the person sitting next to them. You then ask them to share that with the entire class. So that's a very simple, questioning strategy, thinking strategy, to get ideas flowing that happens in our schools and has done throughout time. But that is so much more difficult, as you'll appreciate, on an online platform. And I think there is an impact in RE, and we have to be clear about that impact in RE, because RE as a subject is a subject where we analyse, we evaluate, and we critically think. And it's not easy to teach that from the front. And when I say from the front, I mean from in front of a microphone and a computer, because as you'll appreciate, those type of skills are participatory skills which students have to actually engage with, and they have to make sure that and as teachers we have to assess that they've understood that their actual process and actually mastered such a skill. So for that purpose, we can, you know, I'm quite happy to say that it is extremely difficult teaching online. I am personally very happy and excited to be back at school, and I think you would not find many teachers who wouldn't say that at the moment, because we are best placed in our classrooms. And we do have we have the opportunity in our classrooms to really bring RE alive, and that's not to say RE hasn't been brought alive online, because there have been, as things have grown and developed, I have now mastered the art, for example, of creating small groups or pairing students off in teams so that they can have discussions by typing in the chat amongst themselves, so they can start and then feed that back into the wider class. But as you'll appreciate, those things take longer, those processes take time. So there is some really positive work being done online, and I think it's extremely important that SACRE acknowledges that, but also acknowledges the impact of the lockdown on the workload of individuals, particularly teaching staff, but also support staff. Deanna wishes to speak, and then I would love it if some of my teaching colleagues might want to offer their reflections very briefly. So Deanna.
Okay, two things. First of all, as is Caroline, I'm involved with Northumberland SACRE, and the problems that you have had reaching out to the children who don't have computers or internet connections is the same in Northumberland. And Dave Cookson, the RE advisor for secondary schools, when we last spoke, he was spending a lot of time accessing dongles and computers and iPads for the children. And also, you must have the same problem in Durham, where there are areas where there are black spots for you know, internet access. You know, just to say that I think the problem that you've got is the same across most of the Northeast for the kids. And the other thing I wanted to say that what I feel, and I think you know about this, Paul, the encounter with people from other faith communities is very, very important. And I've done one or two sessions for schools, either recorded or face-to-face in classrooms. And, you know, I'm willing to do that if teachers want access to a Jewish person, even though it's via the internet. I'm very happy to do that. I don't want them to shy away from asking, and happy to talk to kids.
Thank you, Deanna. I think that's a really valid point, and I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because Encounter is a very big part of what we do as RE specialists in RE classrooms. And as you'll appreciate, for a considerable period of time, most schools, or a lot of schools, have not been inviting visitors in, and that's something quite often written into their risk assessment. So it's nothing more than that, other than that it poses additional risk to bring further adults into the building, especially since social distancing can't be adhered to in schools, and therefore I think, you know, those kind of offers and those kind of opportunities to exchange resources, definitely Catherine will feed that back to RE network meetings, I'm certain, because if that is, you know, if colleagues are willing to offer some of that would be extremely helpful and valuable for our young people in Durham. Can I bring in Barry?
Thank you very much, Chair. From a teacher's perspective, I 100% support the concerns that you have, Paul, regarding the socioeconomic factors and access. I think that's been a massive, massive challenge, obviously not just in our area, but everywhere, as has been pointed out. But I do know that schools have put a huge amount of effort into getting things like the dongles and the laptops and the iPads and other resources, and also for some students getting paper resources instead, work packs, separate projects, which has on occasion meant that 2 sets of works being produced, a set for the students who can and the set for the students who can't access. I know that as a teacher, we put a huge amount of effort into trying to prepare different ways of doing the same things to get engagement. We have been looking at things such as getting live documents up. So we can actually comment on and mark and support work live as the students working it on their computer. It also appears on our screen, and providing feedback through a variety of questioning methods that we're becoming more used to through the chat rooms and so on. And we're very, very fortunate at our school. And I know quite a few of my colleagues are getting a huge amount of training around developing this new way of working. It has been exhausting, if I'm honest, and we have ended up doing a lot more to achieve what we want to achieve. It's been a depreciating result for the amount of effort we put in once it gets past a certain point. But I do feel that all of the efforts that we put in are for a very good purpose. You know, speaking on behalf of myself and other colleagues I've spoken to, it's all about the best possible deal for those young people. And I feel as challenging as these circumstances have been, and as hard as it's been adapting everything we do, we've been very well supported by our schools and our leadership, and we're very, very fortunate from that point of view. And it's the right things to do for our young people and for our communities, because those socioeconomic issues that yourself, Paul, has mentioned, we think about. I do genuinely, deep in my heart as an educator, I believe that education is the best thing that we can give them to try and level that playing field for these young people. So it has been hard. We have adapted. We are doing everything we can for the young people, and it is worth it, would be my viewpoint.
Thank you, Barry. Absolutely well said. We also have Wendy who would like to ask something.
Yeah, a couple of things really, just to go back on what Deanna said. And I've had a request as well from the school to visit them virtually to make a video. And I'm more than happy if anybody wants to meet a Buddhist, be they teachers or children, please put me down as a volunteer. But also, I think what you said, Barry, I just want to speak as a parent and say how much I really, really appreciate the work that schools and teachers have done. I think it's been staggering that education has continued in the way it has during the pandemic. So a really big thank you to you people. You've done a fabulous.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. Would anyone else like to come in on this agenda item? Now is your chance if you have any questions or points of clarification. I just think for the minutes we'd like to make sure that we give a note of thanks to especially all of our RE colleagues and school leaders, and the support that school leaders receive through Education Durham and other areas, you know, to give a note of thanks really in our sacred minutes for that work during very difficult times, as I think we've outlined. Thank you. So the date of the next meeting, item 9. Item 9 is, I can categorically confirm that the next date of the sacred meeting won't be on our usual date. As you know, we usually meet on the first Thursday in June. That is half term. And I would say, although Julie's quite rightly pointed out earlier, teachers do often work through half term, but it's quite often at their own pace. And and obviously, I think there will be colleagues who will be taking some much needed rest there. So at the moment, we don't have a date for a future meeting. There is a reason for that, and that reason I also understand is because we have some upcoming county council elections, if that's correct, and that will also mean there will be a change potentially in our county councillor representation on SACRE, and as a result of this there has to be a certain amount of opportunity for training and so on to take place. So it could be possibly that meeting will happen later than usual, but I promise it will still happen this academic year, and I will work with Paula to get a date for that meeting set up. And I think as soon as I have a date for that meeting, I will now contact the colleagues on the planning who offered to do planning, so we could put a date in advance of that meeting, so we could work together and more collaboratively as a SACRE on the items for the agenda of the next meeting. Okay, we are ahead of time. We do have an item of any other business. I'm aware of it, and then it might take some time to discuss. And I would like to pass the floor to Wendy, who would like to raise this issue, and then we will have a discussion as usual. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Paul. So I have asked Paul if we can put an item on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss the additional guidance for humanism that we received at the last meeting. And I'd like now just to discuss a bit of the background and why I feel it's important for us to discuss that document again. And also there are a couple of things that I think we perhaps need to think about taking action on in the interim before the next meeting. So I'll mention those as well, and we can have a discussion about that. So the proposal is that we have on the next meeting agenda an item which is to debate and make a formal decision on whether the additional guidance for humanism document should be endorsed by the proposal. And the background is that this document was at the last meeting, and it was very welcome because SACRE now has a responsibility for non-religious worldviews as well as for religion, a statutory responsibility. The document, when it was presented, was agreed syllabus for religious education in Durham 2020, additional guide for humanism, and SACRE was asked to endorse it. So at the time we agreed that the title agreed syllabus should be removed because the agreed syllabus obviously is a statutory document that is subject to approval by a formal conference of SACRE. And that had been done in this case. And so that title, it was agreed that would be removed. There was a lot of discussion about it, and the secondary colleagues who've used it reported that they found this really excellent resource. There wasn't any feedback from primary. I don't know whether that was because primary colleagues had used it. There were some concerns about some of the materials. The document itself links to resources which are provided on another website. And Susan, who very kindly kind of presented this document, explained to us that the document can't be changed. The document is what it is. And at the time, there really wasn't a clear consensus about endorsement. But in the meantime, I think there's been a little bit of confusion, and the published version of this document now on the Humanism website does carry a foreword, which carries an endorsement by Durham SACRE. So first of all, the case for a bit more discussion around this. Endorsement is something that we haven't done before in SACRE. So if we leave the subject of this document per se and just think, should we endorse things in principle? We're talking about endorsing teaching resources. And so the first point is, do we want to do that? Because it could set a precedent. If we endorse these teaching resources, would we then be open to requests to endorse lots of other teaching resources with all the time commitment that would involve? The second point is that we would be endorsing a document which contains links to resources that can be amended without SACRE approval. So the endorsement would sit there, but the actual materials could change. And do we really want that to be something that we're responsible for? And the third point is, it wasn't clear to me what value it is for SACRE to endorse it. I've had a look online, and those SACREs which have links to teaching resources. I've only found 2, and the 2 that I found very clearly said, we don't endorse these resources, but you may find them helpful. So there's a long list of things that you can access and use. And I think this is a particular issue when we're thinking about the primary level resources. Secondary level, we have teachers who are specialists in RE, but at primary level, we have people who are non-specialists delivering the RE provision. And so my concern is that an endorsement by SACRE may lead people to assume that the resources are suitable for use in all cases. And as always, with any, this is a non-religious worldview, humanism, but with any worldview or faith, materials produced by that community are developed that community in mind to inform and support that community. Whereas SACRE is responsible for the provision of religious education, which is quite different. It should be non-partisan. So having looked at some of the resources myself, there are some that I feel some concern about at primary level, but we haven't really, a lot of work's gone into producing this document. It's really good quality, but we haven't really had an opportunity as a group of SACRE to look at it properly, to discuss it, to debate it, to examine it. And so I feel if we decide that we are going to go down the route of potentially endorsing teaching resources, we owe it to this document to look at it properly before we make the decision about whether to endorse this particular document or whether we don't. So that is the reason why I'm proposing that we put it on the agenda for the next meeting specifically. And it would be really, really, really nice if some of our primary colleagues perhaps could give some feedback, maybe even advance of that meeting. If we've got a planning meeting 4 weeks before, then perhaps that would be an additional opportunity to discuss this. Before I talk about what things that might need to be addressed in the interim, I've been thinking a lot about this over the past week since we received the materials with the minutes from the last meeting. And it strikes me that we're in a position now where we as SACRE members really need to, we've always treated this role responsibly, but we now need to treat it even more responsibly, because the amount of professional support that Education Durham are able to provide for us has reduced over the years. And that's no reflection at all on Julie or anything else. It's to do with budget, isn't it? It's to do with the amount of resource available. And so in this modern world, we perhaps all need to try to SACRE professional support and really, really, really up our game a bit and be even more committed to working with the materials around us and just meeting the new challenges. We're not in a steady state situation. There are new things happening. Paul's talked and Barry and others have talked about RE in a virtual world. We've got all these new resources coming online. We've got new teaching to support primary RE provision. That's all fantastic. A very big change in that we are now, as SACRE, we have a statutory responsibility for Durham County Council, and we now have to include non-religious worldviews, which is something that we haven't done before. So I feel it's really important that we do that really, really thoroughly and really well. So that's the argument for having this item on the agenda again at the next meeting. And in the meantime, there are a couple of things that I think need to be addressed. One of them should be straightforward, and that is that the draft version of the additional guidance document, which is currently publicly available on the Durham County Council website, still has as its title page agreed syllabus for religious education, even though the document that's now published by the Humanists on the Humanism website has correctly removed that title. So I would like to suggest that we should ask Durham County Council to apply a clarification to that document on the website to make it clear that it's not part of the agreed syllabus. And the second thing I think we should do in the meantime, I'm proposing to the chair and to the meeting that as there wasn't a consensus on endorsement last time, and we are going to be discussing it again, that the currently published endorsement should be temporarily rescinded. And really happy to discuss that and to take any comments.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I would like to bring in Brian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wendy. I just wanted to say that to thank Wendy particularly for exemplifying what she's calling for us as SACRE members to do, and that is providing such good professional level support for the SACRE. I think this is and to thank her for her vigilance on behalf of SACRE looking into this issue so thoroughly. I agree with her tabling the motion for our next agenda, and I also want to second her 2 action plans in the meanwhile. I think they're reasonable, and I just wanted to, that was my contribution on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhakti Rasa. And we also have Karenza.
Thanks, Paul. I totally agree, actually. I think Wendy's outlined it really well. I can't remember agreement on the endorsement at the last meeting. I remember the discussion. I can't remember anything else about it. While there is a debate, we need to have that debate. So I totally agree with her. The other thing is that Natalie's put in the chat a really important point about what constitutes a worldview and how happy people are to have those worldviews involved. And we've had some discussion at a recent SACRE meeting in the Northeast on the inclusion of Jehovah's Witnesses and teaching about them. So it is only going to get more complicated rather than less. So I'm not sure we actually need to discuss the document itself in its detail in the way that Wendy has proposed, unless we agree to endorse. I think the issue is, do we endorse at all? And what might that mean? And I think it's really worth having that discussion. So thank you. And thanks to Wendy, all the things that Brian said.
Thank you, Karenza. Natalie, did you want to come in, or has that point already been made?
Kind of. I just think it might be wise for SACRE for us to all, I don't know if anybody else has read the Commissions of RE, the report on worldviews and the discussions that are currently taking place across the board for that. And I don't know whether it's worth SACRE being provided with a copy of the most recent report on worldviews for the next meeting. It might be quite useful for us all to see.
Thank you. And Deanna, did you want to come in?
Well, the situation in Newcastle is that, in fact, our humanist member is a full member, and this came about quite some time ago. It's possibly 10 years ago, and I actually left it to the RE advisor at that time to sort it out with the local authority. In Northumberland, it's not the same situation. And I just felt, just from a practical point of view, that I think that primary school teachers, you know, they've got the 6 main faiths to try and introduce across the primary stage. And for another one, another something else to be brought in. I don't know whether the capacity is there, but I mean, you know, I'm not a teacher, so that's just how I feel about it.
Thank you, Deanna. Judith?
Yes, I'm in quite agreement with what Wendy said. I'm going back quite a few years now, but I ran RE networks in my school in Bishop Auckland for a lot of years, and I had a teacher who came from a primary school whose head was a humanist, and we had quite a lengthy and difficult discussion with this head because he was not allowing RE, as in RE, to be taught in his school. And the school where I worked at, we had a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses as well, which caused a difficulty in that they were all asked to be taken out of general RE lessons, which then caused a difficulty. So we were in the process of who dealing with those, and it was, the problem was with the other children and why weren't they taking part and things like that. So I think a lot more guidance on sort of other religions and other areas would be most helpful.
Thank you, Judith. I had myself on the list before Wendy. With regards to this issue, and again, it's very difficult to think back to a discussion that we had 1 year ago. And it was immediately before I had to step out of the chair and actually pass to Judith as chair. But we had an agenda item which was talking obviously about the documentation which was provided. I think for a point of clarification for all of SACRE, this appears because it was included in the papers of Durham Sacre, it is included, just like today, the whole agenda and all of the papers are available on the Democratic Services section of the website. So they're not in the education kind of department or education section in any way. It's kind of under Democratic Services, under SACRE, and obviously that version is the historical version which was presented to SACRE. So that explains why it is clearly still part of that particular meeting. And obviously I accept, and I've had a discussion with Wendy about this, that if somebody did do a Google search, for example, to try to find the document, that it might lead them to that. But I'm not sure what we can do as SACRE about that issue, because it is a historical document that was presented. The second part of this is that I had left that meeting of the understanding that there were to be some changes made. Nobody had asked to move to a vote, and therefore I had understood that had been endorsed by SACRE, because that was the request that was made, I believe, during the meeting. Of course, you know, in light of the minutes, we need to revise that and try to get a full understanding of that situation. And I'm absolutely determined to do that. I do think, though, that that given where we are with this, that it would be wise to proceed how Wendy has suggested. And I'm quite happy to take Wendy again, and then if there are no further people wishing to speak, I can only presume consensus, unless there is anybody opposing the proposal. So Wendy.
Thank you, Paul. Just wanted to respond to Judith's comment. I don't think it's an issue of whether this is a humanist document or Jehovah's Witness or anything else, really. I think it's about us being careful about the role of SACRA in terms of endorsement, but also being responsible in terms of our provision and making sure that the agreed syllabus over the years does evolve. And I think, you know, I suppose it's worth making the comment that non-religious world views, you know, humanism is quite, you know, it's not the only non-religious worldview, but equally, it's not only, I too am a humanist, but I'm a religious humanist, I'm a Buddhist humanist. So it's not so much about what the particular faith is, it's whether we really want to put ourselves in a position where we need to review and endorse materials that have been produced by any faith community. I wouldn't expect to be able to prepare resources from my own faith and say, please, SACRA, endorse this, for example. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that that was clear, that it's not about whether it's humanist or something else.
Okay. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this issue? I think we have therefore agreed to place it as a substantive agenda item next time. If SACRA are in agreement that we would then temporarily rescind the endorsement that I understood that SACRA had made. And furthermore, I just need a point of clarification, Wendy, on the expectations around the website, because it is a historical document and record as part of that SACRA meeting, and I'm not sure whether I can, whether we have the authority to change that. So I don't know. Could you just clarify your proposal around that?
Yeah, this might be something for us to check out with Julie, but I wouldn't suggest that we change that document, because obviously the document needs to be, you know, the records of the meeting need to be as they were at the time. And so technically, I don't know what is possible. I know that when I type in a Google search for additional guidance for humanism, the first thing that comes up is the Durham County Council version, which says it's part of the agreed syllabus. And so if we could put something, I don't know whether it's possible to put a page in front of that or write a comment on which says something about it being a draft, or that it, you know, if you like, puts out a notice that it's not part of the agreed syllabus. Technically, I don't know what's possible. I don't know, Julie, can you make any suggestions?
To be honest, Wendy, I can't, because what's on Democratic Services area of the website has nothing at all to do with me. That would also be always be managed by Democratic Services. So, you know, it would have to be, you know, Paula or somebody that would have to give us some guidance around that. Because, as I say, it's got nothing to do with me at all.
In that case, what we need is a plan of action for somebody to approach Democratic Services with a request for some change to be made. I don't know, would any of the councillors be prepared to do that on behalf of SACRA?
If I could just say that, unfortunately, I'm not standing next time, so this will be my one and only meeting, which has been extremely interesting, but it wouldn't be a good idea for me to do it. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. we could ask Councillor Tinsley. I'm quite happy to speak with Paula after the meeting, if that is the will of SACRE, to see what would be possible with regards to that. Unless, of course, one of the councillors would like to make a representation. Okay, so can it be resolved, therefore, that in addition to the Councillor Brown?
I would suggest that it's not my place as a substitute member, Chair. However, I could approach Councillor Martin and explain the problem to him.
Yes, I'm quite happy about that. How does the rest of SACRE members feel? Ian, you're from Democratic Services, I believe. And Ian's not a member of SACRE, but he is present in the meeting. Ian, would you like to come in?
Yes, Chair. I would just like to suggest that your suggestion of having a word with myself or Paula after the meeting to say what could be done regarding the website is probably the easiest and the fastest way of getting something done.
Okay, thank you for that. That's appreciated. Okay, so if that's resolved, then just to make it clear, because I would like to always, where possible, feel a consensus in the room, and where not, we do then move to a vote, and that is our democracy, of course. Is that we will have a substantive agenda item at the next meeting on this issue. We will temporarily rescind any endorsement of the material, and I will contact Paula or Ian after the meeting to discuss how the previous version could be amended or removed from the Democratic Services website. Is everybody in agreement? Anybody further wish to speak on this item? Okay, then we can close any other business unless there are any further points of clarification or further any other business. I've not been notified of any in advance other than that. Okay, that's great. So before I close the meeting, I would really like to thank everyone for taking part, and for those members of the public and media who've watched this meeting. This concludes our business. Thank you.